Hi everybody, Scott Hards here, back for another episode of Boss Builds, and yep, I'm still working on my Jagdtiger. If you're just joining us, this is the Blitz by Takom Jagdtiger kit that we've been working on. This is my fourth round going at it, and if you watched up to the last 3 episodes, you've seen that I've finished the suspension and tracks of the kit. It's looking pretty good. I really like the detail and the crispness of the tracks that Takom has put together here for us. And of course, you heard me moaning in the last episode about how this is the most repetitive and redundant part of the kit, but we've gotten all of that behind us now, and now we get to the part that I like to call putting on the bits. Now we have to go to the upper hull part here and some of the panels that attach to it and start attaching all the little detail parts that are going to go onto this kit, and there's a lot of them. So we're going to dive into that just as quickly as we can, but it's not just going to be snipping little parts out and gluing them on. There's going to be some sections on this where we're going to have to make some modifications, and we're going to take a look at the instructions here, and you can see there's sort of these cryptic little icons in a few spots on the instructions here. Where it's not really clear what you're supposed to do unless you go check the index. So we're going to take a look at that, see exactly what it is that they want you to do. And the reason for that is because, as we pointed out before, this kit is the early-late compatible version, where you can build either the early version or the late version of the mighty Jagdtiger. And there are some slight differences between the way the equipment goes on the tank and some of the other fittings. And in order to make the kit compatible for both versions of the tank, some of the things on here you don't need for one version, and there are some things that you do need that aren't on there for other versions. So we'll take a look at how to do that. So we got a lot of little bits to do, so I think we should dive in and get going. Okay, we're finally ready to get started with all of the little bits that are going to go onto the hull of the tank here. And you'll recall that this is, the early-late convertible kit of the Jagdtiger, which gives you the choice to build either the early or late version. And as you can see from the instructions, everything going forward, except for a couple of steps, is divided into the -1s and the -2s for the early or late version. I'm going to build the early version of the tank, so we're just going to stick with the -1s. And as you can see, the very first thing, we're going to put together the back of the hull here. That's this part right here, part D1. And you can see right off the bat that they've got a funny little icon here pointing at 4 spots on the part. And if we dig into the instructions here, as you can see, that icon means to drill. So we are going to drill some holes. Now, if you take a look at the instructions carefully, you can see that it tells you to drill a 0.8 millimeter hole. Now, we're talking about thin plastic here, so of course you don't need to go get yourself a big power drill or something if you don't have one. All you need is what's called a pin vise, or a hand drill. Looks kind of like a silver pencil with a drill bit in it. Now, the drill bit, of course, can come out. This works just like a larger drill. You can just put these bits in and out, and I've got my drill bit in there already. And we are going to open the holes that it shows on the instructions here. So first, of course, we have to get the part off the runner. Easy enough to do. And thoughtfully, the folks over at Takom have put 4 little dots or indentations here on the back of the part that you can see there, which is where we need to open those holes. So we're just going to go ahead and do that right now. And you just put your index finger on the back of the pin vise, put the drill up against the holes, and with a little bit of firm pressure, you twist the drill in with good old manual power. All right, we've got 2 more holes to open here. And this will only take a second. And there we are. Now we're going to take a look on the other side of the part, and you can see that where we drilled it out, there's just a little bit of plastic flash that has come through the holes here. So we use our modeling knife, hobby knife, to remove that and keep this smooth. All right. And now we're going to put the part in place, but it turns out that we have to assemble the part first. So now we're going to put together the jack, which goes on the back here. Getting way off into the weeds real quickly here, whenever I see one of these jacks, I always think about TIE fighters from Star Wars. And the reason for that is that the original TIE fighter model that was built for Star Wars, they kit bashed it. It wasn't CGI. It was made with parts from other model kits. And if you look on the outer panel, in the center of the black panel on a TIE fighter, you can actually see Panzer jacks stuck on the side there. So a little bit of trivia there for you. Now let's make that jack. This part is purely by the numbers, folks. Doesn't really require any special explanation. Just cut off the parts and assemble them as they're shown on the diagram. And now we have our little German jack all built. It's kind of remarkable to think that a little device like this could have been actually used to raise a 60-ton tank, but apparently it actually worked. Now we're going to attach the brackets that held the jack onto the back of the tank, and these are going to use the holes that we just opened to attach. Now we've left just a very small amount of extra plastic on the flat surface here. So we're going to use the hobby knife to just very, very carefully take that off. Looks pretty good. Pretty delicate little parts, so of course we don't want to put too much power into pushing on them when we attach these. You have to do a rather tricky job of putting the part over the part while you put the part on. And I'm having some issues here, as you've probably noticed. Okay, finally got that jack slipped through the part. It took me a while because the part is so delicate and I didn't want to break it. So, being extra careful. And the cement I applied is long since dried, so we'll dab some more cement on there. And finish up this part of the assembly. Here we go. Finally got him into position. And now we're just going to hold it for a few seconds to get it to start setting up. And we'll put this part down and let it dry before we fiddle with it anymore. So that's the jack on the back there. Okay, now that we've got the jack on the back of the hull part here, and it even moves freely there inside of the racks, probably like the real thing did. But there are a couple of little stays that you have to put on to kind of help hold it in place. Now, on a detailed tank kit like this, and also often on ship kits in particular, you'll often get to deal with some very small parts. Now, if you look in the instructions here, what we're going to deal with now, you can see, is this part C31, these little pegs or whatever that hold the jack in place. Now, unfortunately, these parts are that big. Oh, see, there it goes. They're so small, they're very hard to work with. Now, I've already given away what I'm going to suggest that you do in order to deal with parts of this size, because they're just so small you can't really hold them in your fingers while you're applying them to where they need to go. So you want to get yourself a nice pair of precision tweezers. This, just like a good pair of nippers, is going to be a great tool that will ease a lot of your frustration, make things a lot easier for you, and probably last a lifetime as well. So don't be afraid to pay a reasonably good amount of money for a nice pair of precision tweezers. Perhaps, $10, $20 or 10, 20 euros or so. Something like that would probably be appropriate for a good pair. Now, let's see if we can find that little part that I just dropped. There he is. And rather than pick it up with my hand, I'm going to start using these tweezers to handle it. So first, of course, we need to apply some cement. And now, because there's no way my fat fingers are going to fit in there, we are going to use these tweezers. Don't want to squeeze too hard because you risk launching it. And then we're just going to ease it right into the hole where it needs to be. And as they say, the best laid plans. It's a snug little fit there. So I'm going to need to grip it at a different angle in order to get this to happen. We are in. So very hard to see, but you got that little guy in place now. And now we got to go put his twin in on the other side. Also, when you're cutting these sorts of really fine parts off of the sprue, If you just do it like this, you're going to launch that little guy and maybe never find him. So you're always going to want to hold the part while you cut it off the runner. So yeah, some slightly nerve-wracking detail work going on here, but we're looking pretty good. Fortunately, it looks like the next few parts are going to be a lot bigger than that. So we've got 2 part C13s to go on, which are the towing hooks, I believe. There we go. Now we've got our towing hooks there. And now we've finished the first step under the early. Now you see in the center here, they've got this box in between both the early and the late version. It says make 2. These are the exhaust pipes. It's in the middle, of course, because it's the identical parts for both the early and the late version. So we're going to semi-mass produce a couple of those and get those onto the back of the tank as well now. Okay, we've got them assembled, and now they glue on into these spots here. It's pretty obvious from the way the holes are shaped how they have to go in, so there's no special challenges there. Looking good. Sometimes on these extremely small parts on a kit like this, in order to get the plastic to flow through the mold properly, they have to provide an exit point for the plastic as well as an entrance point for the plastic on each part. And occasionally you're going to see something like this right here. This is the part I'm about to put onto one of the exhaust pipe covers. And you can see there's these 2 round items on the left and right here. Now this is not part of the part. But there's nothing in the instructions that tell you this other than the fact that the illustration of this particular part is in a different shape. And it does look a little funny with those. So if you take a look here, it's not super clear, but this is the part we're talking about. And it's clearly not the same shape as they're showing, or as you can see on the actual runner. So you have to be able to identify those and know that those need to be clipped off as well as removing the part from the runner. Working with these detailed parts, I tell you, your fingers will never have felt so big. Okay. So now we've cleaned it up here into the shape it is supposed to be, and we're going to attach it now to one of the exhaust covers, which has the little grooves for it in it. Now I've also attached these tiny little, don't know what those are, attachment points or cable pulls or something for the exhaust pipe cover. Now I'm not going to pretend that I know what these things are exactly. Perhaps someone in the comments who's a bit more well versed in German tank details could let me know. Actually, putting the parts on is going to be easy because they have very large and prominent indentations where the little pins go. So this will be an easy assembly job, just dropping some cement into the hole. Now we're being careful, of course, as we put this on, that we're not going to put any pressure on the little details we've recently attached. Okay, step 10, as you can see. This is one of the few steps in the middle here that does not have the 1 and 2 designation. It's just step 10 because it's common for both types of the tank, and that's to install the back part of the hull into the actual hull assembly itself. This is going to be pretty straightforward here. Now, you always want to test fit parts before you put them in place, and I've already done that here. And this goes in really, really smooth. And very cleverly, of course, Takom has molded some nice weld detail into the edges that hold it into place, too. So it's going to look quite realistic. So we'll just go ahead and cement that into place now. Again, a lot of the parts on the back of that, as you saw, we've just attached. So when we do the work, we want to make sure that we're not going to crunch any of the detail that we've just attached. Now the next step is going to be to start putting all the little detail bits onto the top of the hull now. And if you take a look in the instructions here, once again we've got a little bit of a cryptic icon. And rather than fumbling with the instructions again, I'll just let you know ahead of time that I've looked this up. And what this is supposed to mean, this little icon here, it's like a hobby knife cutting something off is what they're attempting to depict here. And because, again, this has got an early and late version of the tank, some of the little placement markings and stuff that they've put on the tank in the case of the early version are not needed. So we're going to remove those completely. As you can see from the part here, they're talking about removing these. Now they're kind of light and might be difficult to see on camera, but there's some very light rectangular position markings on the side of the hull here, right in this area. And we're going to use our hobby knife just to remove those. These are so faint and fine that this almost doesn't need to be done. But they probably would still show through a coat of paint and look unnatural. So we're just going to scrape with the edge of the hobby knife here and maybe use the blade a bit to just remove these from the tank. And of course we want to be careful we don't scratch the surface of the tank, which I'm almost doing just now. Again, these are really, really low, so... Okay, I think I've done as much as I can with the knife here. Now you can see, of course, in the bright light, there's a little bit of scratching that's been done to the surface of the tank as I did that, and that's probably not even going to show up through a coat of primer. But just to be on the safe side here, I am going to go grab some fine sandpaper and use that a little bit. Now what I've done here is purchase some fine sandpaper previously, cut it into small, appropriately sized strips, used a marker to list the grit on the back, and also used a clip that I labeled here on the front. This makes it really easy, of course, to just grab a piece of sandpaper of the grit you need for this kind of work. Now, for keeping fine detail in place, but getting the rough edges out, what I'm using here, 1000 grit, is probably going to be appropriate. So we're just going to very gently smooth this area of the tank out after removing those unnecessary guys. And as you can see, as you do this, you're going to get some plastic powder collected on the surface of the tank. Of course, you can just brush that away with your fingers. And that looks pretty good, and it also feels pretty good. So we have now removed those unnecessary marks, and we get to go over to the other side and repeat the same process. Now once we've got these marks off, then as you can see here in step 12, we've got all kinds of little bits that we now have to just start attaching to the tank. These are all going to be just pretty much straightforward clip it off the runner and stick it on the tank kind of operations. And I'm going to plow through the next 3 steps, get all these bits attached to the tank, and then in our next episode of Boss Builds, I'm going to go over how to work with these photo etch parts, which are not common. There's some kits, most kits probably do not have photo etch parts, depending on what you're building, and you may not be familiar with how to work with them. So I'll show you how to do that in the next episode of Boss Builds. Thanks for watching, everybody.